When the cameras went live and Rachel Maddow sat before millions of viewers, the expectation was another typical night of commentary, analysis, and discussion about the ongoing political landscape. But that evening took an unexpected turn that instantly transformed the broadcast into one of the most talked about moments in television news. Live television has a way of magnifying drama, and when a revelation drops without warning, there is no time for the subject to prepare, no script to shield them, and no way to control the narrative. The shocking revelation that unfolded in that moment was not just information, it was an event that carried weight, consequence, and symbolism far beyond the details themselves. Maddow, known for her meticulous approach to investigative journalism, delivered what can only be described as a bombshell, and the timing of it on live television made the impact even greater. The element that makes live television so powerful is unpredictability. Audiences know that what they are watching is unfiltered and raw, and the people involved cannot edit, cut, or revise their responses. When Maddow began building up to her disclosure, there was a palpable sense of suspense. She carefully laid out context, drew connections, and teased what was to come in a way that gripped viewers' attention. Then, almost suddenly, she revealed information that had been hidden from the public eye, information that challenged Donald Trump's image, credibility, and carefully constructed narrative. This was not a pre-recorded piece where producers could soften the blow or dilute the message. It was real-time, and the reaction was instantaneous. The nature of the revelation mattered just as much as the delivery. Maddow did not simply read off a fact, she unveiled something that had been long speculated on, fiercely denied, or cloaked in secrecy. By presenting concrete evidence, whether in the form of documents, testimonies, or connections drawn from investigative work, she turned speculation into confirmation. The audience at home felt the weight of what they were hearing, because it wasn't just commentary, it was proof. In an age where rumors circulate constantly and misinformation spreads quickly, the distinction between speculation and verifiable information becomes crucial. Maddow's revelation carried credibility because she was not throwing out unsubstantiated claims, she was unveiling something backed by tangible sources. Another layer that added to the shock factor was the subject of the revelation himself. Donald Trump, throughout his career and presidency, has projected an aura of invincibility, often dismissing critics and brushing off controversies with counterattacks or diversion tactics. He thrived on controlling the media narrative, dominating headlines, and framing himself as the one always in charge. To see that armor pierced live on television was a rare moment. The revelation undercut his sense of control, because he could not spin it away instantly. Millions of viewers heard it at the same time, and his reaction, captured live, could not be hidden behind carefully crafted statements. That immediate exposure intensified the humiliation because the timing robbed him of preparation. The fact that this happened on Rachel Maddow's program added yet another layer of meaning. Maddow has long been seen as a sharp critic of Trump, but her critiques were usually grounded in methodical breakdowns and long-form analysis rather than sudden, gotcha moments. This made the reveal even more unexpected. Viewers tuned in expecting her usual mix of commentary and evidence-based reporting, but instead they got an explosive moment of disclosure that felt theatrical in its timing while remaining journalistic in substance. That blending of shock value with factual basis is what elevated the event beyond ordinary political theater. It was not just an attack, it was exposure. The ripple effect of such a live revelation cannot be overstated. The moment it aired, clips began circulating online, headlines were drafted within minutes, and social media erupted in debate and disbelief. People who were watching live instantly started sharing their reactions, creating a digital echo chamber that amplified the impact. The immediacy of the response showed how modern media ecosystems magnify live moments. Within an hour, the revelation wasn't just confined to Maddow's viewership, it was trending worldwide, dissected, replayed, and analyzed from multiple angles. This kind of reach ensured that the shock was not isolated to a single broadcast but became part of the broader political conversation. The dramatic nature of the disclosure was also amplified by Trump's persona. For years, He branded himself as someone who had secrets worth hiding yet could not be touched by opponents. Maddow's revelation cut directly into that mythology. Audiences felt like they were witnessing a rare crack in the facade of someone who usually thrived on being the one doing the exposing rather than being exposed. This reversal of roles, Trump becoming the target of an unanticipated truth bomb on live television, made the moment unforgettable. The power dynamic shifted in real time, and that shift was visible not only to viewers at home but to Trump himself. The shock of being the subject rather than the controller of narrative gave the revelation an added sting. One cannot ignore the way Maddow's deliberate pacing contributed to the drama. She did not blurt out the information all at once, she led viewers down a path, layering context and hinting at significance until the final disclosure hit with maximum force. That narrative technique mirrored investigative storytelling but delivered in a live format gave it the weight of theater. The suspense she created made the revelation feel not just informative but climactic. For viewers, it was less like hearing a news report and more like witnessing a historical event unfold, one where the atmosphere of tension made the eventual disclosure land with a thud that reverberated far beyond the TV screen. The effect on viewers' perception of truth and accountability was profound. People expect politicians to dodge, deny, and spin, but when confronted with verifiable revelations, especially in real time, the contrast between rhetoric and reality becomes glaring. Maddow's disclosure did not just challenge Trump, it forced audiences to reconsider the narratives they had been told. It punctured the fog of uncertainty and gave shape to suspicions that had previously floated without concrete foundation. Watching that transformation from speculation to evidence unfold live added to the sense of shock because the audience felt like participants in discovery rather than passive consumers of pre-packaged news. The revelation itself was powerful, but what truly magnified the drama of that moment was Donald Trump's reaction as the truth unfolded live on television. For a man who had built his political persona around confidence, bravado, and relentless defiance, the shock was not only in the content of Rachel Maddow's disclosure but in the way it pierced through his carefully maintained image. Trump had long portrayed himself as unshakable, someone who could never be rattled by criticism, investigations, or revelations. His brand was rooted in dominance, in always being the one to control the room, seize the microphone, and dictate the narrative. But in that live broadcast, millions of viewers saw something different, a visible shift in demeanor, an undeniable crack in the armor, a reaction that spoke volumes even when his words tried to cover it up. The power of body language in such moments cannot be overstated. Trump had always relied on his physical presence as much as his rhetoric to project authority. The confident posture, the exaggerated hand gestures, the steady eye contact with the camera, these were tools he used to reinforce an image of strength. Yet when Maddow's revelation hit, those very cues betrayed him. His posture stiffened, his facial expressions faltered, and there was a fleeting yet telling moment of silence that suggested he was searching for footing. Even for someone accustomed to deflecting questions with speed and aggression, the delay in his reaction became noticeable. In live television, a pause of just a few seconds can feel like an eternity, and that eternity carried a message: he was rattled. Audiences are remarkably adept at detecting inauthenticity, and in that moment, Trump's attempt to regain composure looked less convincing than usual. He tried to fall back on his standard strategies, dismissing the information as false, attacking the source, and projecting outrage, but the delivery lacked its usual sharpness. His voice wavered ever so slightly, his tone carried a defensive edge rather than an offensive one, and his eyes shifted as though he were calculating his next move rather than instinctively delivering his trademark counterpunch. For a figure who thrived on appearing unstoppable, this was a deviation that audiences picked up on instantly. The mask of confidence slipped, and in its place was a glimpse of vulnerability. The psychology of humiliation adds further weight to why his reaction mattered. When public figures are exposed or contradicted live, the inability to control the narrative often provokes not just embarrassment but a primal form of discomfort. Trump's political persona was built around strength, dominance, and superiority, so being caught off guard struck at the core of that persona. He wasn't just dealing with the content of the revelation. He was grappling with the sudden loss of control. For someone who thrives on controlling every moment of public interaction, being forced into a reactive stance was itself humiliating. It placed him on the defensive in front of millions, and defensive was a posture he worked hard to avoid. Viewers who tuned in witnessed a contrast between the Trump they were used to and the Trump they saw that night. Normally, when confronted, he leaned forward, spoke louder, and doubled down, exuding certainty even in the face of inconvenient truths. This time, however, there was a flicker of hesitation, a brief falter that suggested he had not prepared for this moment. That gap between expectation and reality made the reaction all the more striking. People weren't just shocked by the revelation itself, they were shocked by the fact that Trump, usually so quick and forceful, appeared momentarily destabilized. It was a rare sight, and its rarity made it memorable. The media quickly seized on these subtle cues. Clips of the moment were replayed with slow-motion analysis of his facial expressions, pauses, and tone of voice. Commentators noted the visible tightening of his jaw, the sudden shift in his gaze, the stiffened body language, all markers of discomfort under pressure. While Trump's words tried to reassert control, his body betrayed the impact of the blow. This discrepancy between what he said and what he displayed created fertile ground for interpretation. Pundits described him as shaken, embarrassed, even cornered. The reaction became a story of its own, as powerful as the revelation that triggered it. The setting amplified the effect. Live television, with its unforgiving immediacy, does not allow for edits, reshoots, or spin before the footage reaches the public. Trump could not retreat to a safe space, regroup, and release a polished statement later. His initial response was broadcast in real time, preserved for replay, and dissected endlessly. This lack of control magnified the humiliation, because no matter how many times he or his team tried to reframe the situation afterward, the original footage remained untouched. Viewers had already seen the moment of hesitation, and once seen, it could not be unseen. Another factor that made his reaction so significant was the symbolic reversal it represented. Trump had built a reputation for putting others on the defensive, often using live platforms to ambush opponents, label them with nicknames, or undermine their credibility. In this case, however, he was the one being cornered, with no opportunity to set the terms of engagement. Maddow's timing left him no chance to prepare talking points or develop a counter-strategy. The spontaneity of his response was exactly what made it so revealing. For a man who prides himself on quick wit and dominance, being stripped of preparation exposed cracks in his ability to improvise under true pressure. Public figures often underestimate how much audiences read into subtle expressions of discomfort. Even small shifts in tone or body language can erode the perception of confidence. For Trump, whose appeal was rooted in projecting unwavering dominance, any display of shakiness risked undermining that appeal. His visibly shaken reaction did not just reveal a moment of vulnerability, it challenged the myth of invincibility he had so carefully cultivated. That myth was central to his political brand, and even a single moment that contradicted it carried outsized weight. The aftermath showed how quickly a reaction can overshadow the revelation itself. While Maddow's disclosure was shocking in content, much of the public discussion afterward focused on Trump's demeanor. Was he panicked? Was he caught lying? Did he lose control of the narrative? These questions swirled precisely because his visible unease provided fertile ground for speculation. Audiences weren't just processing facts. They were analyzing behavior, searching for clues in his expression, his voice, and his movements. The visible shakiness turned the event into not just a story about information but a story about character. The immediate aftermath of Rachel Maddow's revelation and Donald Trump's shaken reaction sent shockwaves through both the political sphere and the broader public. What happens after a live disclosure of such magnitude is often as important as the moment itself, because the ripple effects can shape narratives, influence public opinion, and redefine the balance of power. The political and public fallout in this case was multi-layered, touching on party strategy, media dynamics, voter perceptions, and the larger cultural conversation about accountability and truth. Within hours of the broadcast, political operatives scrambled to assess the damage. Trump's allies in the Republican Party were thrust into a defensive position, forced to answer questions they had not anticipated and provide explanations they had not prepared. Party spokespeople attempted to dismiss the revelation as exaggerated or politically motivated, but the fact that it had been aired live and accompanied by concrete evidence made it difficult to brush aside. The hesitation in their responses mirrored the hesitation that had been visible in Trump himself, and this lack of confidence seeped into the broader narrative. For a party that had often rallied around Trump's image of strength, the optics of scrambling to contain the fallout were damaging. Democrats, on the other hand, seized the opportunity to amplify the moment. Lawmakers and strategists quickly echoed Maddow's revelation, framing it as proof of long-suspected patterns of dishonesty, concealment, or corruption. They used the live broadcast as a rallying cry, emphasizing that the truth had been unveiled before the public without filters or partisan editing. For them, the fallout was a chance to push their broader narrative that Trump was unfit, deceptive, or incapable of transparency. In the hyper-partisan environment of American politics, moments like this often become weapons, and the speed with which Democrats moved to capitalize demonstrated how politically valuable the fallout had become. The media ecosystem magnified the impact. Traditional news outlets replayed the footage relentlessly, dissecting it from multiple angles, while digital platforms spread clips across social media at lightning speed. Analysts wrote think pieces about what the revelation meant for Trump's legacy, while commentators debated whether this was a turning point in public perception. Cable news channels devoted hours of programming to panel discussions, scrutinizing every detail of Maddow's presentation and Trump's reaction. Social media became a battlefield of memes, hashtags, and viral commentary, where humor and outrage blended to create a collective cultural response. The sheer volume of attention ensured that the fallout lingered long after the broadcast ended. For Trump's supporters, the fallout created a test of loyalty. His base, long known for its unwavering devotion, was confronted with evidence that contradicted the narrative they had been defending. Some doubled down, dismissing the revelation as yet another attempt by the media to attack their champion. Others, however, found the live nature of the disclosure harder to ignore. When something is revealed in real time, without the opportunity for editing or spin, it carries a weight that pre-recorded reports lack. The split among supporters highlighted the tension between loyalty to a leader and acknowledgement of undeniable evidence, and this tension added complexity to the political fallout. Public opinion polls in the days and weeks that followed reflected this complexity. While Trump's most devoted followers remained steadfast, undecided voters and independents showed signs of shifting. The image of Trump visibly shaken, paired with the weight of Maddow's revelation, raised doubts among those who had previously been on the fence. In a political environment where small margins can determine outcomes, even slight shifts in perception had the potential to alter future elections. The fallout was not just about immediate headlines, it was about planting seeds of doubt that could grow over time. The institutional response also played a role in shaping the fallout. Calls for investigations, hearings, or accountability measures emerged as lawmakers sought to transform the revelation into tangible political action. Committees began examining whether Maddow's disclosure had broader implications for policy or governance. The idea that a televised revelation could trigger formal inquiries underscored how live media moments can intersect directly with institutional politics. For Trump, this meant that the fallout extended beyond image and perception into the realm of concrete consequences. Internationally, the fallout was closely watched. Foreign leaders, diplomats, and international media outlets analyzed the revelation and Trump's reaction as indicators of weakness. In global politics, perception of strength matters, and a visibly shaken leader facing public exposure on live television can alter the way allies and adversaries assess power. The fallout was not confined to domestic politics, it rippled outward into the international arena, shaping how America's leadership was perceived abroad. For Trump, whose political brand relied heavily on projecting strength to both domestic and foreign audiences, this was an especially damaging dimension of the fallout. The cultural resonance of the moment added another layer. Beyond politics and policy, the fallout entered the broader cultural conversation about truth, transparency, and accountability in public life. Maddow's revelation became a symbol of the power of journalism to expose, while Trump's reaction became a symbol of the vulnerability of even the most confident leaders. Late-night comedians, satirists, and cultural commentators incorporated the moment into their work, ensuring it reached audiences who might not typically engage with politics directly. The fallout became not just a political story but a cultural reference point, embedded in the collective memory of the time. The endurance of the fallout can also be explained by the way it disrupted expectations. For years, Trump had defied political norms, survived scandals, and emerged from controversies relatively unscathed. The assumption that he was untouchable had become part of his image. Maddow's revelation and his reaction to it punctured that assumption. Even if the fallout did not immediately topple him politically, it chipped away at the aura of invincibility that had sustained him. That shift in perception, once it takes hold, is difficult to reverse. It marked a turning point where people began to view him not as untouchable but as someone who could be cornered, exposed, and shaken. The longer-term fallout was shaped by repetition and reinforcement. Every time the footage was replayed, every time it was referenced in debate, and every time it was used as evidence in commentary, the memory of that moment grew stronger in the public mind. The repetition ensured that the fallout was not fleeting but persistent, continuing to influence perceptions long after the initial broadcast. It became a touchstone for discussions about Trump, a moment people could point to as emblematic of his vulnerability. The durability of such fallout is what makes live revelations so powerful. They are not just moments but anchors in the political narrative that continue to shape discourse long after the cameras stop rolling.